Don't stop.
Hi, thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything in a Bit Gay podcast. I'm your host, Zach Randles-Friedman, and Zach Randles-Friedman just got back from a little vacation getaway with his husband. I'm talking in third person for some reason. I don't know why. But I just got back from a little mini vacation. We went away to a hotel and didn't really leave the hotel. We left one day for a few hours to go explore this little town, but we did nothing. We got massages every day. I got a facial one day. We sat in the meditation room. We took naps. We ate at the restaurant. We had some delicious wine and champagne and cocktails, and it was just really amazing. It was cold outside, so we had no desire to be outside, and you didn't really need to leave this hotel at all. And the service was good, and we had a lot of fun. And, one of the things that I've thought about while I was there was just kind of, was I tired? Yes, I was tired before I went, but I think sometimes people don't know the difference between being exhausted and being burnt out, because there was a time in my life, not now and definitely not with this podcast or my current job, but there was a previous couple jobs ago where, you work so much and you do so much and you feel like you're burning out, and you're not quite sure if it is exhaustion or if it's just you're tired, or if you're just like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore because I'm burning out. And at that moment, at this particular job years ago that I had, it was definitely, I was on the verge of burning out. And it's hard to come back from that. I was lucky enough to leave that job and then go off and do something that I actually enjoy doing. But I think sometimes you also just need, you're tired and you need a rest, and you need, like for me, I need to be able to clear my mind. I need to be able to reset myself, and going on these like mini vacations like this. And we drove to this place. We didn't have to fly. We didn't have to take a train, any of that. So there was no delays. There was no traffic going there because we left at the right time. There was no traffic coming back because we left the right time. It was only an hour and a half away from our house. So it was just kind of perfect. And I, again, thought about like, what do I want my next 6 months to look like? And I want to make sure that I'm leveling myself out, that I'm not doing too much. I'm not overscheduling myself, trying to do everything in a weekend. Because, I do these lists. I'm like the biggest list maker. And I make these lists and I continuously like check them off. And then I add 3 things to the list later in the day, and I never get through my list on the weekend. So if you're a list maker, you know what I'm talking about. But I am going to try to do more relaxation. Meditation is something that this trip made me realize I needed to do every single day for at least 20 minutes and not skip a day. I did start journaling in 2026. That was one of my New Year's resolutions, and I've started it and I've kept up with it, and it's been going great. And I'll be excited in 10 years to go back and read and see what was happening. The funny thing is we had this room that's in our house. It's a bedroom, and we kind of put all of our clothes and jackets in there and all these extra sheets, and there was boxes we didn't unpack. And a couple of weeks ago, we actually went through that room and cleaned it up. And it's like, there's a queen size bed in there. So it's like a perfect guest room now, almost perfect. But I found this journal, 2 journals that I wrote. One whenever I first moved to New York City in 1998. My friend Jen gave me a journal, and every day I would kind of like, there was this park that was down the street from my apartment in New York, and I'd go sit there and write in my journal. And then I would do it at nighttime before I went to bed. And I started reading some of it back, and it's just like, that was 27 years ago. Like, that was a long time ago. I was a completely different person, a different frame of mind. I was living in New York with no money and no friends, but 1 or 2. And so it will be interesting to see when I go back in 20 years to read what this journal is, to see what I'm saying. And, I don't know, maybe one day I'll be a famous podcaster and they'll take my journal and write a book about me or something. I don't know. I think journaling is just good for your mental health and just to kind of get everything out. And I'm very honest in my journal about what bothered me for the day or what I did and what I liked. And sometimes I don't have much to say, but I always try to write at least a couple of paragraphs. I keep it to one page in this journal book, and some days I have a lot to say, but that's how it is. Anyway, you're going to meet someone. His name is Christian Hurst. He is a science fiction storyteller. He also grew up in the Mormon church, and his religion kind of shaped his worldviews in a way, but he's a completely different person now. And we talked about his creative process and just who he was. And I just, again, that whenever I meet certain people and I interview them, these are people like, I wish they lived in Boston because they would be an awesome person to go to brunch with or go to happy hour with. And Christian is one of those guys that he would be a fun friend. So I think we've had a good interview together, and I would love to have him back on someday. But enjoy the interview with Christian. The links to his books are in the description of this podcast, so check them out, buy them, and support good authors. So thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the interview. Thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything in a Bit Gay podcast. Today I have Christian, who is an author, and we are going to get into his books and his life, and I have lots of questions for him. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so basically your work that you're writing and the work that you do is kind of an intersection of like sci-fi, humanity, identity, empathy, and it's kind of goes through all those different crossroads. Is that a best way to kind of explain who you are and what your book is about?
Yeah, I love how you said that. Absolutely.
And before we get into the books, I want people to know who you are a little bit. So if you're meeting somebody for the first time, how do you kind of describe yourself to somebody? Because you have an interesting way where you grew up, like how you grew up, how you've changed since you've grown up, and, from a religious standpoint and stuff. So can you talk a little bit about all that? Because I think that's interesting.
Yeah, totally. And, I really emphasize the here and now. I'm very much like in the moment. This is who I am kind of being, but that's obviously a collection of all of our experiences leading up to this point. So like I meet somebody, I always describe myself as a creative. That's who I am because I've just been an artist and a creative my whole life. And through different media, I've worked in film, I've worked in fine arts, I've worked in graphic design, and advertising has been my main career. And now being an author, and which is just very fulfilling. But I've written, since I was a little kid. But I'll tell you what, fiction and science fiction specifically, but like stories and escaping into other worlds has always been a meaningful part of me. And it's been a way for me to interrogate myself. So like from a time that I was a young child, I felt a little bit like I was on the outside looking in. Like I was a little different and I was a little weird. And I always kind of loved that about myself, that I was weird. But it's also, when you have that perspective, I think it can give you enormous insight into the world around you, but it can also be incredibly lonely. And so that is something that I've, sort of had that dual perspective for a long time, where like I grew up in the Mormon church, for example. And when you grow up in that environment, especially in the time period when I did in the 80s and 90s, everything in your family revolves around the church. And so I would see people, get up and talk about, I know this, I know the church is true, I know that this is going to happen, I know this prophet, blah, 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 blah. And, which I don't like to like trash on the church or anything, or like my upbringing. I'm very grateful for my parents and the job they did raising me and stuff. But like, I knew from a very young age, I could see these people, they would get up, they would say this with such surety, and then inevitably something would make them doubt, or something would not happen that they were sort of counting on happening,
Yeah.
and it would pull the rug out from under them. And I saw this over and over again, and it began to frame my perspective as to like, well, you get up there with such confidence and say you know, but you really don't know. You want to know. You wish that you knew because it makes you feel better. And like for me, that was always the way that I saw it. Like I wanted prayer to work so bad when I was a kid. I
Yeah.
wanted it to, mean something to me.
Yeah.
And I tried, I really did, but it isn't it wasn't my path. And so very quickly after I reached, adulthood, I moved away from that. But I think if you go back to like the storytelling and the fiction perspective, not to let me ramble too much, but um,
No, I want to hear. I wanted to hear about all this. So, and I want to know. And you stepped into humanism, and can you
yeah,
tell me
yeah,
what that is?
absolutely. And so like when you look at the storytelling and the fiction perspective, like some of my favorite authors, like Victor Hugo and Ursula Le Guin, for example, they talk about the dangers of absolutism and humanism being the opposite of that in my mind. So it's like
Mhm.
when I approach another human, I try, and we're all,
Yeah.
not perfect, but I try to see them for our similarities first, because I believe that all humans have more in common than we do differences. And when we see somebody and we immediately see their differences, we're looking for an excuse to hate them. And that is a safety mechanism that's built
Yeah.
into our evolution. It's how we keep our tribes safe, so to speak, where it's like that person might be a risk, so I have to watch out for that. But as fully baked human beings, we have the capacity and responsibility, I think, to meet each other at a baseline first and say, okay, we're human beings first. That's a common ground. And then from that, I could obviously be critical of people and their actions and
Yeah.
all of that. But like, I think starting from a place of similarity is so important. And that immediately throws that idea of absolutism out the window. So those people going up and saying, like, I know this and I know that. You see that all the time now. You see, like, oh, I know what's going to happen in the next, what's going to happen in the next election, or I know what's going to happen with such and such corporation or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
it's like, but you don't know,
Yeah.
it brings you comfort to say that you know. But I think admitting that you don't know is the first step to like inner peace, or whatever term you want to use. Like,
Yeah.
just for me, it's increased my happiness level so much to be like willing to say, I don't know.
And how did that evolution kind of like help shape your writing in a way? The stories that you're telling.
Well, it's like a cycle, because like the stories that I've read or watched or experienced when I was younger helped me pick apart myself and my identity and understand who I am. And I think having that core sense of self is the only thing that gives me the strength to get through the day. Sometimes I get through, because like you're going to enter a room and everybody's going to have a set of expectations about you,
Mhm.
or automatically think things about you and have their judgments. But only you can know what's really inside. And so when you have that strong core sense of identity, that's what gives you the strength to move forward. And so that was a message that was really important for me to bake into my art and my work over the years. And I've had this idea for a long time for like a fiction series, and being sort of a creative professional, I finally, I don't know, I'm 42. I was like, I just got to get this out into the world.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
I'm not getting any younger.
It's
If
like
I'm
now
ever
or
going to
never,
share
right?
these ideas, yeah. And so, in true like me fashion, it's kind of like the people who know me. I was like, yeah, I published a book, and they were like, oh, of course you did. But um, like, I put it out in the world, and I was very happy that people connected with it, and so I've continued that journey, and it means a lot to me that other people feel. I think a lot of the things that I talked about, and I put that in the book, where it's like this idea of being on the outside looking in, this idea of loneliness, the idea of all consuming loneliness. When you're young and you don't have that life experience,
Hmm.
that tunnel vision is real, and so it's very dangerous. In fact, it's that idea that you are going to be lonely or alone forever. And so I really wanted to reach younger people and say, like, hey, you work on yourself, understand who you are, and that connection will happen. That's like the promise of the book. It's like understand who you are and be true to that, and that connection will happen.
One of the things you said that kind of stuck with me is that you're talking about storytelling as kind of a form of survival. Is that kind of what you meant, like as you're writing this for the younger generations and stuff, that helping them kind of think about that as a
Absolutely. So, when I was younger, it was that for me, like having these worlds where I could escape to, like, and immerse my mind in and really think about internally, like, these fantastical situations, especially sci-fi. I've always related to it that way because it's like the it allows you to escape reality, but also think about all the things that are bugging you. Like you, I watched Star Trek a lot when I was a kid, and it's like the lessons they have in those shows are about our world here and now, but it's in this fantastical setting, and so you can
yeah.
sort of kind of forget the stress of it. And but we still work out those themes and those lessons and those. And so I do the same thing now when I write. It's like very cathartic for me, and then I think hopefully for the people that experience the media, the work, that they feel the same way. I wrote a love story. I never thought I would be one to do that, but I was writing the second book in the series, and I got to this chapter where the one character has kind of this big emotional arc. And I realized it hinged on the relationship between these two characters. And so I stopped what I was doing and I went back and I wrote this short story about their time together on the planet in between books, like, and their love story. And I think it might be the best thing I've ever written, actually. But that's not a brag. It's just like
Yeah, no,
I
yeah.
really put a lot of myself into it. I like stayed up all night writing it, and I published it the next morning. And I think people were like, "This is really cool. It feels like raw and real and in the
Yeah.
moment." And I was like, "That's because it is, because I just literally wrote it and published it." But that's the kind of writer I am. It's like then I was able to go back and continue writing in the second book because I had sort of worked through these relationships. But the characters become very real to me, and I put a lot of myself into them.
Can you tell us a little bit about who Lily Starling is?
Yeah, I mean, on the basic level, she is a queer young woman who lost her memory, and that's where we find her in the
Mm,
beginning of the story. And I did that for a few reasons, but I thought it would be interesting for the audience to enter the book at the same place that she is, because she doesn't know what's going on, or the reader
yeah.
doesn't know what's going on. So it's kind of fun to discover it through her eyes. But on a deeper level, she is someone who nobody is going to tell what to do. I gave her radical agency. I made her a character kind of like you would think James Bond or somebody like
Mm,
that, where they enter a room and they make a decision. Right? There's no stopping them. They're
yeah.
just the decider, like in whatever situation they're put in. And so that was a lot of times people ask me why I wrote a young female protagonist, and that was part of it. Is because I wanted people to have a certain set of expectations going in, and then for that to be thrown out the window, because people tend to think of, especially for like an emotional decision for a young woman to be, oh, I'm so conflicted about this,
Yeah.
I have to meditate over it or whatever. But like that's very much not her personality. So
One thing I noticed kind of about your writing, your books, is that your book resonates with people who are kind of like outsiders in a way, like you talked about Lily being, a queer woman. So that's, you're kind of bringing in audiences that maybe today feel like outsiders and probably can relate to her. Is that something that you've kind of meant to happen, or it's just
absolutely. I mean, I did that intentionally. I was intentional about it, but I also that's just my world. Like I,
yeah,
those are my friends. That's my, I surround myself with those type of people because that's just how I see the world, and it's so boring to just be like ordinary, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, but at the same time, I think um, I don't know. Yeah, I was intentional about it, but I think that the the writing is universal. I think that the experiences, the emotional core of the book, anybody can relate to it because I tried to stay on a very elemental human
Yeah.
level, and that's what a lot of people have actually really liked about it. They're like, I loved how you have queer characters in the book, but it's like has nothing to do with the plot. And I was like, thank you,
Yeah.
because like that was a big thing for me. It's like, yes, this like the captain of the ship is gay and he has a husband. It's not relevant to the story at all. It's just that's who the character was in my
Yeah.
mind, and so people just kind of I don't know. So far, people have enjoyed that about the books that it's like this great big space epic, but it's more modernized because the characters are diverse.
But I love that you're doing that just because you're kind of making like you know, like you just said, you that's who they are, but you're not like dwelling on it, and it's just kind of making it the norm of society in a way. You know what I'm saying? Like I think
Yeah,
it's really powerful doing it that way instead of focusing on, you know, she's queer and like let's talk about it 25 times in the first chapter, you know, like you know what I'm
right.
saying? Like I think the way you're doing it is very, very smart.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I didn't. I also didn't want to shy away from like pointing it out. So I didn't want to hang a lampshade on it, but I also do have a conversation at some point in the book where like her girlfriend is teasing her about um, this person that she works with who's very attractive, and Lily's like, I don't even think she's gay, like, but I because I wanted it to be said out loud. I didn't want it to be like this. Well, we don't see distinction between we don't see color kind of thing. I
Yeah.
didn't want it to be that either. I want it to be very much like yeah, there are gay people in the future, but it's not a big deal. It's like just who they are.
And we'll be right back. Okay, now back to the show. Whenever you're hearing about, so I'm going to nerd out a little bit for a second. Whenever you're hearing a little bit of, when you're hearing about the three eye atlas thing that they're talking about constantly in the news, and it's supposed to be like closest to Earth in a week or something like that. Like, does that kind of inspire you? Because it's like real world stuff that's happening, and you know, personally, I really do hope it is some type of spacecraft, and they're going to land and like maybe make this world a little better or something, or I
Right.
don't know. Like, do you think about those things as you're even writing or not writing?
I do. I love science. I love science fiction of all levels. The writing in space opera is a little different because technically, I mean, this could be like under the sea. It could be
Yeah,
in the ice cream universe or whatever.
yeah,
Like I always tell people, like Dr. Seuss did some great space operas, like Horton Hears a Who and stuff. Because I mean, it's like speculative fiction, but it's like these entire microcosm worlds that we
yeah,
don't, So it doesn't have to be like spaceships or ray guns kind of thing. So it's less science and more like fantasy, I guess. But I do love science, and I love would like Star Trek or like a show that's normally kind of like soft sci-fi fantasy is like
yeah,
goes hard into the science. I do enjoy that because but I'm not a scientist uh, personally, but I do like to read a lot. I especially love biology. I get really into like I read a lot of nonfiction about like evolution and
yeah,
like that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
but I do
I
find space interesting.
I do. So me and my father. It's interesting. You mentioned Star Trek because growing up, that was the show we'd watch together, and we would also, whenever the movies came out, we would actually go to the movies
Oh,
theater
nice.
to actually like, watch
Yeah.
it together. So it was just like a thing that we had. My mom had no interest in science fiction or Star Trek or anything, so it was me and my dad's thing to do. So it's kind of funny that
That's
you mentioned
neat.
Star Trek. So
Yeah, I love that. A lot of good Star Trek memories.
yeah, I mean, we were watching the early ones from, was it the 70s, I guess? Was that
Yeah,
when? Yeah. When you kinda sit down, what comes first? The character, the theme, the world? What kinda comes first whenever you start a new story?
I love that question. So the it's for me, it's always character and theme are the primary, and then
Mhm.
plot comes second. So I always identify like who is this about, and what are the big things that I'm trying to explore. Because I really think when you're engaging with a story, those are the things that connect with you on like an emotional level, you know. And then I can sort of write a plot or a story that works with that. I mean, I have a general idea of like the overarching plot, but like each specific plot point, I kind of work out after I've developed the themes.
So you talked about you were in advertising and you've done all these other things, but whenever you started kind of writing full time, what surprised you the most about yourself?
I think just how it was more like, on the one hand, it flows out a lot more easily than I thought it would, but then it's also kind of like I'm fighting with these characters almost. It's like that's not what I wanted you to do,
Yeah.
but they have like a mind of their own.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it leads me down a path, and you know, I always preface this by saying it's not a brag, but like I Shakespeare is legend like rumored to have written in a very linear fashion, where like when he hit uh, a point in the story where he like had written himself into a problem, he would
Mhm.
write his way out of a problem instead of going back and revising the earlier part of the draft. And I do that. That's my process. I will write from the beginning of the story to the end with very few going back and making changes, because I find that it just feels more real. And then I will allow myself to go back and you know, tweak things and edit it, obviously. But like I try to let the story progress out of my mind in a linear fashion instead of like building it almost like you would scene blocks, because I just
Yeah.
find I think that's how life is, right? You make a problem, you got to figure out a
Yeah.
solution to the problem. You don't get to go back and fix it.
So I interview a lot of people that are either, I don't know, like very creative people. I interview a lot of those types of in that world. So whether they're an actor, a singer, a starting their own production company, I have a lot of people that have day jobs and that are trying to do something creative on the side, and they really want to walk away from the day job and like focus fully, but they can't because they're even for me, I have a day job. I would
Yeah,
love to be doing podcasting full time.
right.
I'm just too scared to walk away from my day job to do it. So, what
Sure.
advice do you kind of give? Would you give like all these people that are creative that really want to step into doing that full time? I mean, because it seems just from what you said in this interview, you're so much happier kind of writing and creating this than you were probably doing advertising or doing whatever you were doing before. And it's your like it sounds like it's your like where you were meant to be. Like how do you do that? How do you take that step and like I'm doing this?
Um, I think there's a couple parts to that. So like I want to set aside the financial aspect first, because that is, I think that's the part that you can't really like,
Exactly. It
you
is.
can't control
Yeah.
100%, you know. So um but I think as far as the mentality of like putting your work out into the world, like the advice that I always give people is to just keep creating, because that's what allows you to eventually like get over that anxiety of like, this is my precious thing and I'm giving it out to the world, and then you know I'm really praying that people are gentle with me. Like, and I think my advertising career, or my career in marketing, brand marketing, helped prepare me. Like the
Yeah.
100th time that you put your work out into the world and millions of people see it, and then they forget about it the next day, you stop being precious about
Yeah.
your work, you know, real quick, because even if it was their favorite thing in one moment, they've already forgotten about it by the time you're working on the next thing. Um, so you get used to that cadence, and now it's kind of nice to have something that's like my own art that people are interacting with, and it has a little bit longer shelf life, which is kind of fun. But I'm a little less sensitive to criticism and things like that because of my career. But I think that is a muscle. It takes time to like
Yeah. Totally.
develop that. as for, I still have my position at AARP. I'm still their director of brand strategy. So I haven't made that leap fully.
Yeah.
But here's what I think. I see it as an extension of my existing creative career. So I've never limited myself to one. Even when I was in like government consulting for a while, and I got over to like the project management side, even though I was still doing graphic design, but
Mhm.
I was like, I see this as a creative effort because it's like you can be creative about like, I use design thinking to build processes and stuff. And so like I'm a little weird in that I will geek out about whatever is in front of me at the time and just like put my whole creative energy into it because I see it as sort of just an extension of my, creative career and my like being I have an artist mentality, but it doesn't
Yeah.
stop me from doing very practical work sometimes. And so that's more of a mindset thing. And I'm just lucky I'm built that way, I guess,
Yeah.
because I know some people are just miserable doing certain jobs. And
Oh yeah. I have a lot of friends that are just. I have one friend that sends me a text message or an Instagram post every Sunday night where it's just like, I'm going to run in front of a bus and I'm going to walk in front of a bus tonight just so I don't have to go to work tomorrow. I'm just like, find
oh
a new
no,
job.
yeah,
like, well, how can you be that miserable? I mean, if you, I can understand how you can be that miserable, but if you are, like, look for another job or start. So,
well, and that's part of the reason I have done some entrepreneurial things in my life, and I feel almost a responsibility to stay in leadership because I'm a compassion first person, and I am a humanist, and I understand how hard it can be to work under someone who is not that. And
yeah,
so, at least by staying in leadership, I can make someone's life less miserable, and that
yeah.
like is rewarding to me because I've had managers and bosses who I don't know. It feels like they actively try to make people miserable, and I'm like, what a
Same.
terrible
Yes.
existence. Why would you be this way?
Yeah, I know. I feel the same way, and I actually have learned a lot from those people because I do the
Same.
opposite of what they do.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And there's that great line in Dickens in A Christmas Carol where he's talking about Fezziwig, and he says he had the power to make people's work heavy
yeah,
or light. It's like totally true. If you ever find yourself being a boss, don't be a dick. Like,
yeah,
come on.
exactly. So what do you have coming up next? What's your next creative project you're working on?
I am working on book 3, so I have, there's Voyage of the Salamander, which is book 1, and then
Yep.
Storm Riders, which
And,
is the
and just so
sequel.
everybody knows, or if you're listening to this, I will put a link in the description of this podcast or video, so you can go out and buy these. So if you didn't write
Yeah,
down the
thank
names
you.
of them, you can go to the description and find them.
Great, and yeah, so from the first adventure, Lily, she kind of is finding herself, and then the second book is really a coming of age, and it talks about like frustration of becoming an adult and sexual frustration
Mhm.
and like things that you are out of your control. I wrote this like kind of with the pandemic in mind. It doesn't have a pandemic in it, but it has this
Yeah,
big storm, and the storm is like something that people can't control, right? So it's just like that frustration of trying to become your own self and finally like getting your footing and then just getting knocked over.
yeah.
And so that's the second book. And then the third book is going to be a little bit darker, but I'm promising people that the fourth book is a lot more hopeful. So, but
Okay.
if you stick through it, but the third book is about institutions and like coming to terms with the fact that our institution's a necessary thing, even though Lily hates
Yeah,
authority, as you'll see in these books, and she's not crazy about working within the confines of a organization or
yeah.
that kind of thing. So that's what the third one's about.
So when somebody finishes one of your books, how do you want them to feel?
Well, I've always said this about my art, like in terms of whatever media it is. It's like I want you to whatever you feel is right. Like I don't control your interaction with
Yeah.
my work. So I hope that people will walk away with something that made them think a little bit, but also gave them hope in a realistic way. So like
Yeah.
I am a realistic optimist. Like I don't actually believe I can change the world more than I actually can, but
Yeah.
I believe that the things I can do to make things better matter. And
Yeah.
so like that's that's my sort of like realism and optimism that I
Yeah.
work into the stories, and I hope people kind of come away saying there are little things I can do and that it's
Yeah.
not nothing. That's something, right?
Yeah, I mean, think about the people that you are impacting, it's not like you're impacting the
Right.
entire world, but you are impacting people, which is in a positive way, which
Right.
is amazing.
And I'll get a review or something that's like talks about it. Or even I got uh just a comment on an ad on social media the other day that was like, thank you for putting these books in. It's like somebody I've never seen them post a review or anything. I don't know who this person is, but they're like, thank you for putting these books out there. I love them. That's it for me. Like life
Exactly.
made, like
It's the same thing
that's
for
the
me. Whenever I get
reward.
I got a comment on YouTube about one of my interviews about I don't even remember what it was, but it's just about how much I cared about the person and I brought this person's story forward and I showed how they were a survivor. And I'm just like, and I asked one of my friends, I'm like, did you write this? And they're like, no, like, just take the comment, take the compliment, like, just take it. And I'm just like,
Yeah,
okay. So, yeah, I get
that's
what you're
so
saying.
true.
So, well, thank you so much for being on. You were an amazing guest. And I will put the link to your books into the description of the podcast. And I hope everybody goes out and buys them because they really are. It's a great series. And I'm looking forward to the third one.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been wonderful.
If you have not subscribed to the podcast, please do. Also, leave a comment and let us know what you think about Christian's book. And then also, if you buy his book and you read it, come back and tell everybody what you thought in the comments. So, thanks so much for being on, Christian. I appreciate it.
Thank you.